You sent me this diagram,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna not checking my text and pulling up the diagram. And then we'll get this for the YouTube. We'll get it up on the screen for you guys and on Anchor, I guess. We will have like a link to it in the description, maybe, or something like that. But basically, it just shows. You want to describe it?
Yeah. Basically, two sides to this diagram. One side is the left side is the human person with our faculties, what we're able to do, and then on the right side is something that we like an object, something we want, and in the middle is our interaction with those things. And from this builds from Aristotelian and then later on some Thomistic, again from St. Thomas Aquinas, some nuances throughout there. But basically, like on the left, you see like, all right, what is the human person? He's an intellect, so he can know things. He can actively and receptively, so he can like actively, like I'm thinking about this thing, but I can also perceive and understand ideas as you're hearing them. And in there you have reasoning, judgment, and knowledge, which again are all things that happen high up in your intellect. Like these are like the smartest things that I can do as humans. I can make a judgment on whether or not this is a good thing. I can reason about them and know things. And that all happens in the intellect. And then there are these other powers that are kind of in the middle: memory, cogitation, imagination, and common sense. Common sense being these are really tied to the body. So like kicking a soccer ball, like it's just so ingrained in your memory. But if you see the ball starting to roll a little bit more, you have to begin to compensate for that. And that's actually where the common sense will come in a little bit more. And now you're actually imagining, right? Like, okay, that soccer ball drifting a little bit. Now you have to adjust, and you have to adjust your bodily movement and the rest of the other decisions you're making, even with your intellect, based off of your sense of the world. But you're imagining that all right now in your head. You've seen the soccer ball and you're seeing it move, and that imagination also is a part of your capacity, and cogitation, which is the a lower level of processing our ideas. So where do our ideas come from? Where do our anything come from? Really, it's the five senses. So on the very bottom there is we see touch, taste, smell, hearing, and sight. And then from there we abstract them. We're like, okay, great. I smell fresh cookies coming out of the oven. I know what that smell is, and that I can then imagine seeing the cookie there in the oven, starting to bubble a little bit, like just the cookie. I can see the cookie cooking in my head in the imagination, and I smell these cookies that are burning. Perks me up and thinks, wait a second, let's go fix this. Or if I know that I lit a candle that was like a cookie dough candle. I'm kind of my senses are literally deceiving me.
You just want a cookie.
Right, and you're like, oh wow, now I want a cookie. And so your common sense, like everything is telling you, like everything related to your body is telling, ooh, this is a cookie. But then you still know, oh wait, no, I lit that candle. Like that's not actually a cookie. That's something I have deeper. So then there's we go over to the right side, and we see that there is an apprehended good. So that's a good that is known in the intellect. So that's we've spoke a lot about like self-sacrifice, knowing that is a good, like that's an apprehended good thing in the world. And then on the very bottom you see the sensible or pleasurable goods, and those are things that like the body, like cookies. Those are good because they're delicious and they're sweet. And then in between, you see all those dotted lines. Okay, I don't want to get in the weeds on these parts.
Well, we might as well. We're here, aren't we?
Yeah. We'll do that in a second.
Go through the actions first.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Good. Right before that, though, the apprehended good and the sensible good. Like, they're over there and I'm over here. What drives me to the love of cookies are my appetites. My appetites, my inclinations of the body, of like what I need. So like, ooh, delicious cookies. Like that sensual appetite draws me towards the sensible good. I know that if I go help out at the soup kitchen, that's a good thing. That's an apprehended good that I will be doing.
Right.
So you will draw yourself towards the rational appetite, sort of the rational good. So it's,
right.
Or even as something like, ooh, I want to watch this documentary, or like I want to continue thinking about this idea. Your rational appetite is what you understand to be good, because again, it's an understanded good. Could still be actually like an evil thing, but like what I understand to be a good thing, I'm gonna. It leads me out of myself.
Okay.
Towards. Then in the middle of that other red line is the passions. These are. This is more complicated than just like, ooh, I sensually desire cookies,
right?
Or I want to know this, but it's a mix of the two. So that's maybe where the soup kitchen might come in a little bit clearer.
How so?
In that, I know that at the soup kitchen I will be helping other people, and I'll be able to see their faces and understand and have a greater, not just intellectual apprehension that this is good, but a holistic, whole emotional understanding of a good that I'm working towards.
Yeah.
Like a relationship, it might have a sensual good, and it also might have like a good of knowing, like a sensual good, and could be as simple as like you smile at each other, and that's just like that's a good thing. That's a happy thing for me.
But it also makes you happy.
But it also could be like the relationship, what you speak about, what you like, learning about the other and learning about like how you love the other. It's both, right? Like we can't really separate out the two, and so our passions are things that draw us in to those things, to both love it and hate it.
Okay.
So like, let's say I only knew a type of exercise where I would just literally throw up every time, and it was like just painful and terrible for my body every time.
Right.
You're going to literally hate it, and it's not just going to be an up here, I hate it, or like a sensual, I hate it, but it's
both.
Deeper in your emotions. There are two categories in regards to those, and we are going to skip those. We can't.
Yeah.
Go into all this.
That's all right.
One is more complicated than the other. That's the simple aspect to it.
Let's go through the Aristotle, the actions now.
So that long line across the middle, that long diagonal line, there are 12 actions. One of the intellect and one of your choice, one of your will. All from Aristotle's tradition here. Where first you perceive the end with your intellect. You understand, okay, great, cookies, good. Then you wish it, and you're like, oh, I want cookies. Then it goes back to the intellect. Ooh, are cookies good for me right now? And then back to your will. Yes, I intend to like, I've made a judgment about these cookies. I will now intend that thing.
So it's perception, wish, judgment, intention.
So you actually like form your intention of, I should eat cookies about this. Then you're going to deliberate. How am I going to get to the cookies? And then you say, and then you'll come up with a means. And you'll say, I'll walk there. And then you say, okay, great, now let's walk there. And then your mind says, great, let's walk there. And then you finally choose it. And then
decision, choice.
And then you reevaluate the means.
Reevaluate.
And so that's like an actual, now I'm doing the thing as you're then using it. And then you dually enjoy it, both in the intellect and will. So a good thing will, so this could be of any, as we see, it'll lead to an action towards what we are drawn out to be and understand as a good, whether it be could be both a sensual good that I also apprehend as good, because again, this is a distinction between intellect and the body, but like I'm not like a mind floating around in my brain, right? Like I'm so intensely caught up in my body that I need to use both. Right. Which again is an aspect in which the Christian tradition has just so much astounded me in how, specifically the Catholic tradition, how the supernatural aids the natural. So how the intellect perfects the body, how the best good, which like objectively so, like the intellectual goods are better than sensible goods, sensual goods. So like
because you're actively choosing them.
They're just of a higher degree.
By actively choosing them, I mean it's not just something that you have to. Like, I know the actions go through and you have to make the decision for both things, but it's much more of a cognizant, like, I should do this thing because it's the right thing to do, and therefore it's a harder decision because it would be so much easier to not do anything than it would be to do this thing.
Well, even whether or not something is hard doesn't necessarily...
Or,
right,
not necessarily hard, but
yeah.
It would be like, I could go help this person out, but it would be so much easier just to not do anything.
Right, like it's just to sit here on the couch and enjoy the sensual pleasure of just sitting on the couch.
Right, so it's you have to actively go make that decision to go do it, rather than like, I feel like the sensual goods, the sense appetites are kind of more, it's like in the moment type things. And so it's not that it's easier to make the decision there, but it's like it's more based on like, okay, well, this pillow is soft and it feels good, and so I'm gonna put my head on the pillow. And it's like okay, well, that's fine. But the rational one is much more. It is just always going to be a better good.
Yeah. Like the goodness of knowing something about your friend,
right,
is better than dinner. Right?
Yeah.
Like just as far as like a hierarchy of things, like
right.
There are ideas and like things that I know that are going to be better than, like they're just of a higher order.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what is the purpose, or like what, I guess, so I say like what is this showing? Like obviously it's showing how the senses inform the human intellect, and then how that determines what decisions you're going to make. But what is, like, who came up with it? I think you said Aristotle, and Thomas Aquinas kind of tweaked it a little bit. But what was the origin, I guess, or what was the...
Good. So if we look off to the far right, we see those parentheses, and they say zone of moral action versus, towards right at the bottom, morally neutral zone. What Aristotle was concerned with in his Nicomachean Ethics was understanding how humans are to live themselves, live, and how they're to achieve happiness. Like, how is a human being going to be happy?
It's kind of that framework, right, that we talked about earlier, that religious framework a little bit. How is a human being supposed to live?
Right. And so he did it from a purely philosophical, from in a Greek background, but in a purely philosophical manner.
Okay.
So he's trying to understand, okay, great. What are the words that I'm going to use? How am I going to understand the human person? Let me put this out there, so that way I can then begin to understand how a person, a woman might seek happiness. So there's the zone of actual moral action, which is always going to be something that's then associated with your will. But then at the very bottom where you see the morally neutral zone is where we see both our sense appetites and our passions are directed towards. So like our passions and our emotions, right? Like so often we've heard it said, like, our emotions aren't evil things.
Right.
Our emotions are incredibly helpful things that move us towards goods. And they're morally neutral, but they ought to be directed by our reason. So like, I shouldn't just go hog wild eating a whole bunch of cookies, right? Like, we get that. Like, eating cookies themselves and my desire for cookies, that's neutral.
Yeah.
But when I desire cookies over a friendship,
well, it's like even just thinking of the emotion, just like happiness, for example. Like I can be happy that something good happened to you, or I can be happy that something bad happened to you.
Right.
And so the emotion in itself is like, it is what it is.
Right.
But it's what you're happy about that determines whether or not that thing is, I guess, moral, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. Whether it's actually good and will lead you to what you want.